No one ever told me that marrying into a wealthy family wasn't just about money. It was an endless battle to be acknowledged. And no one said that. Even if you love your husband with all your heart, you can still be torn apart by the scorn in his mother's eyes. I lived through it, day after day, meal after meal, every cold glance behind her perfect makeup. I used to think, if I worked hard enough, if I loved enough, they would accept me. But they didn't. And I knew that, clearly, painfully, on the 8th Thanksgiving since I entered that house. My name is Camila Reyes, 34 years old, owner of the Butter and Grace Bakery in Portland's Old Town, Maine. I come from a working-class family. My mother was a seamstress and my father died in a factory accident when I was 9. We lived in a tiny attic apartment, where in winter the wind howled through the walls, and in summer, it got so hot you could bake bread on the windowsill. It was in that old kitchen that my journey with flour and sugar began, not out of dreams, but out of survival. With a full scholarship, I attended Les Miel Culinary School in Boston, and then was hired by the fine dining restaurant Linden Estate, where I spent 7 years, mastering every technique, every rigid rule of haute cuisine. Eventually, I returned to Portland and opened my own little bakery, where every pastry carries a memory from my hard-knock past. My husband, Aaron Whitmore, 38, serves as senior business director at the real estate firm Whitmore and Crane. We met at an art fundraiser for the local hospital. I still remember when he walked up to the dessert table and asked, "Do you have the recipe for this almond tart?" I jokingly replied, "Only if you've got a recipe to calm my nerves." That's where it all started. We fell in love, got married 2 years later, and now have an 8-year-old son named Ethan. Ethan is smart, sensitive, and has his father's eyes. Bright, calm, and full of questions about the world. He loves helping me mix dough, always saying one day we'll open a shop called Butter and Ethan. On weekend mornings, while Aaron's still asleep, Ethan and I wake early to prepare cookies for early orders. His laughter in the kitchen feels like sunshine in winter. We're not rich by high society standards, but we're not lacking either. After 4 years, my bakery has earned a solid place in Portland, once featured in the What to Eat Today section of Maine Weekly. Aaron consistently ranks among the company's top revenue contributors and is often invited to speak at national real estate conferences. But to Margaret Whitmore, my mother-in-law, none of that means anything. To her, I'll always be that girl who brewed coffee in the South Side slums, though I've never been a barista. Since the wedding, she has never once called me by name, just her. At Whitmore family galas, she introduces me as Aaron's wife, the baker. I hear the way she emphasizes baker, as if it's a job unworthy of mention among CEOs and attorneys. And Ethan? She's never attended his birthday, never hugged him, never once offered praise. She buys gifts for her other grandchildren. Bikes, Apple Watches, even ski trips to Aspen. Ethan? A $4 box of crayons with a note. Enjoy. I've asked Aaron many times if he felt it was unfair how his own child was treated like a stranger. He would usually go quiet, then sigh. I know, but she's my mom, and she, doesn't change easily. I understand. But understanding doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I don't need gifts or compliments. I just want Ethan to grow up without feeling rejected, just because his mother wasn't born refined enough. Every time I look at my son, I make a silent vow that even if I have to stand against the world, I will shield him from the Whitmore family's cold gaze. I wasn't born to be a socialite. I was born to be a mother. And I'll do that. With all my heart, with every scent of sweet pastry, and with every tear I shed, silently in the kitchen. Ethan stood before the mirror, adjusting his shirt collar like a little man, his dark brown hair slicked neatly with gel. "Mom, I think Grandma will like me in a navy new suit today." I paused for a second, swallowing the ache in my chest. He believed that. He still believed after all these years of being pushed aside. I nodded. "She'll be impressed, sweetheart." Aaron didn't say anything from the living room, but I could hear his fingers tapping rhythmically on the wooden table. He woke earlier than usual, wore a fresh blazer, tied his tie carefully, as if hoping his appearance could calm what lay beneath. We received the Whitmore family's Thanksgiving dinner invitation 3 days ago. Sent by formal mail, printed on thick embossed cardstock, our names listed at the very bottom. No personal note, no special gesture, but to Ethan, it was magic. "Grandma sent a letter to our house, that means she missed us, right, Mom?" He beamed, clutching the envelope like a Christmas card from Santa. I wanted to say something. Wanted to remind him how that very grandma once struck his name off the family gift list. How she once said, "That boy doesn't look like a Whitmore at all," right in the middle of a reunion dinner. But I couldn't. I couldn't crush the fragile hope flickering in a child's heart. "What should we bring, Mom?" "I'll bake the pumpkin pie, the kind you and Dad like." "I think Grandma will like it too." He said it with eyes so pure it made my chest tighten. I turned away, pretending to wipe the counter, hiding the tear welling at the corner of my eye. On Thanksgiving afternoon I stood in front of my closet for nearly half an hour, just to choose a blouse. Nothing too flashy, but not so plain I'd disappear among the couture gowns that would fill the party. I chose a pale cream silk blouse paired with a knee-length black skirt. Aaron stepped in, placing his hand gently on my shoulder. "You don't have to fit into their world, just be yourself, that's enough." I met his eyes in the mirror. But for me, fitting in means Ethan feels like he belongs. We left the house at 4:45 p.m. The Whitmore estate sat in Westbrook suburbs, a neighborhood where even the porch lights glowed brighter than the fireplace in our home. The iron gates opened automatically, revealing an expansive front garden where the rose bushes looked manicured for a royal ball. We parked beside Aaron's cousin's polished black Range Rover and his sister's white Audi. Ethan stepped out, shoes shining, arms holding tight to the pie box I'd baked. "Mom, where will Grandma sit? I want to sit next to her." I wanted to say, "She's going to avoid you like always." But I just smiled. "We'll see where the seats are once we go in, sweetheart." The 10-foot oak door opened, and the housekeeper bowed slightly to welcome us inside. The interior was stunning, high ceilings glittering with chandeliers, Persian carpets stretching from the entrance all the way to the long dining table. Relatives dressed as if they were walking the red carpet at the Emmys. I felt as small as a spare button on a shirt. "Aaron, Camila!" My father-in-law, Mr. Frederick, greeted us with a gentle smile, his warm hands resting on Ethan's shoulders. "You've grown so much. Want to introduce the dessert for me to try?" Ethan nodded, eyes lighting up like fireworks. "I picked the recipe myself, Grandpa." We took our assigned seats. My place was between Aaron and Ethan, while Margaret sat at the head of the table, 2 rows away. She wore a dark olive velvet gown, a shining pearl necklace, and greeted guests with a wax-like smile. I could feel her eyes land on me, not out of concern, but judgment. Ethan didn't notice. He waited, hoping she would turn, nod or at least glance at him with the warmth of family. But through the entire first part of dinner, she never once looked at her own grandson. Even so, Ethan kept smiling, sharing stories about school, his new teacher, and the essay he'd written titled, "Who I Love the Most," where he had written, "Grandma." I looked at him, speechless. There's a kind of love that refuses to die, even when trampled. And it scared me, how his little heart still believed in someone who kept pushing him away. "Mom." I turned. "What is it, honey?" "Can I ask to sit next to Grandma for a bit?" I gently squeezed his hand and pressed my lips together. "Let's wait a little longer, sweetie, we're about to start eating." But that was the moment everything began to fall apart. The clinking of knives and forks on porcelain rang out like a countdown to something terrible. I didn't know why, but there was a sense of dread simmering beneath the forced warmth in the air. Maybe it was the way Margaret glanced over then turned away, cold as ice. Maybe it was the eerie silence among people who usually couldn't stop talking. Or maybe it was the whisper I caught from one of the distant aunts. "She actually showed up?" I held Ethan's hand tighter. "Mom, where's our pie? Why hasn't it been brought out yet?" I didn't answer. Because at that moment, I didn't know the worst was still coming. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, heels clicking, steady and cold, with a rhythm that struck like pressure points across the room. Margaret appeared at the head of the table, her dark olive gown sweeping to her ankles, a diamond necklace so large it was almost grotesque. "Thank you all for coming." She spoke evenly, without an ounce of emotion. Family is sacred, even if for some it's a vague concept. Several eyes darted toward me. Aaron gripped the armrest, his lips pressed tightly. As everyone began taking their seats, marked with gold-plated name cards, I pulled out the chair for Ethan and froze. In front of my son, there wasn't porcelain, no silver cutlery, no crystal glass. There was a stainless steel bowl, the kind made for pets. It sat shamelessly on the white tablecloth, so out of place even the housekeeper stared. Inside was a heap of brown dry kibble, faintly fishy in smell, and etched into the side of the bowl was one word. Puppy. No one said anything. Not a breath. Just eyes locked on that bowl like a car crash you couldn't look away from. Ethan turned to me, blinking. "Mom, is this for me?" I felt my heart crack. Not shatter, but explode in silent agony. "Grandma, she must have made a mistake, right, Mom?" His voice trembled. Before I could speak, Margaret's voice rang out, syrupy sweet like artificial sugar, deadlier than any curse. "Oh?" I figured a child born from the slums didn't need silverware or fine china. A dog bowl should be more than enough, no? The entire table froze. One cousin gasped, her spoon clattering onto her plate. Mr. Frederick began to cough, and another child turned away, clearly unable to stomach the scene. Ethan didn't understand. My son was just 8 years old. All he could do was stare at the bowl, then around the room, and finally at me, his eyes asking, "What?" Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't, not here. I took a deep breath and stood, slowly, still holding my son's hand. The chair scraped softly against the floor, and silence blanketed the room. I lifted my head and looked straight into Margaret's icy gaze. Without flinching, "Thank you for the invitation." My voice was clear, steady. "We won't trouble you any further." I leaned down and whispered to Ethan, "Sweetheart, let's go." Aaron stood up immediately behind me, without hesitation. "That's enough, Mom, really. Enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the dinner like a knife. We walked away from the table, each step echoing across the marble floor like a silent gunshot. No one stopped us. No one apologized. Just eyes hiding behind wine glasses, behind curtains, behind the false masks they'd worn for years. Out at the car, I opened the door for Ethan. My son didn't cry. He just sat there, his eyes hollow, staring out the window. I wanted to hold him, to say something, but there were no words. That humiliation wasn't aimed at me. It was directed at an innocent child. The car pulled away from the mansion, leaving behind lights and lies. No one spoke on the drive home. Just the sound of wind brushing the glass, and Ethan's soft breaths, as he tried to swallow down the bitterness rising in his throat. And I knew, in that moment, something inside me shattered completely. Not just my pride. Not just my trust. But the last thread tying me to what they called the Whitmore family. Ethan didn't cry when we left the mansion. He sat in the back seat, clutching the pie box that never made it to the dinner table. The streetlights flickered across his face, casting long shadows over his sad eyes. It wasn't the sorrow of a child who had been rejected. It was a numbing confusion, an emotion no 8-year-old should ever have to feel. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw his lips pressed tightly together. His hands trembled, as if trying to hold on to the last fragile shred of dignity left after the cheap shot delivered by the woman he called Grandma. Aaron kept his hands on the wheel, saying nothing, but his knuckles were white from how hard he gripped it. His anger didn't boil over, it burned low like hot coals in a sealed furnace, ready to ignite with a single wrong breath. When we got home, I gently led Ethan inside. The living room, normally filled with the smell of cinnamon buns and vanilla candles, felt frozen that night. I took off my coat and knelt to remove his shoes, but he still didn't say a word. just looked down, still holding the pie box so tightly the lid bent out of shape. I glanced at Aaron, he nodded. I took Ethan into the bathroom and ran a warm bath. Want me to help you get changed, honey? Ethan nodded, eyes still fixed on the invisible space in front of him. I unbuttoned his shirt, took off his tie and blazer, each movement as delicate as if I were handling glass. His small shoulders quivered as I wiped his back with a soft towel. Not a single tear. Just the silent tremors of a child who didn't understand why love had been returned with humiliation. I wrapped him in a towel and held him close. Ethan. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, but he was still trying to hold it in. Mom, did I do something wrong? That question pierced my heart like a blade. I pulled him into a tighter hug. No, no, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. The one who's wrong is the person who treated you like that. And with that, the dam broke. I just wanted Grandma to love me. I said nothing more. I just sat there, holding him in the steam, letting him cry. Cry for all the pain his little pride couldn't shield him from. When I tucked Ethan into bed, pulled the blanket over him and read a few pages of Charlotte's Web, his favorite book, he slowly drifted off to sleep. His eyes were still wet as they closed. I stepped out into the living room. Aaron stood by the window, gripping his phone. He'd changed out of his formal clothes, but hadn't removed his tie, like his mind was still trapped in that terrible evening. Before I could say anything, he spoke. I'm not letting this go. His voice was hoarse, low, but filled with unshakable resolve. I sat down on the sofa and looked at him. What are you going to do? End it, all of it. He dialed, put the phone to his ear. I didn't stop him. Because I knew it was time to cut out the cancer in this family. Mom? Aaron's voice was colder than the night itself. I heard something from the other end but couldn't make it out. Then he said slowly, each word etched in stone. Why did you do that to Ethan? He's 8 years old, Mom. You sat him in front of a dog bowl. That wasn't a joke, that was humiliation. I walked over to him. He grabbed my hand but didn't stop speaking. Listen, from this day forward, you are no longer part of our family. I'm resigning. I'm leaving Whitmore and Crane. I will not let my son grow up under that toxic shadow. I heard Margaret screaming on the phone, panic in her voice, like a trapped animal. But Aaron hung up without hesitation. He looked at me, his eyes burning. You've endured too much, so has Ethan. From now on, I'll protect both of you. I wrapped my arms around him. For the first time in years, we were looking in the same direction. No one standing between us. That night, Aaron called 4 of his closest partners. I sat nearby, quietly watching as he laid everything out, clearly, concisely, with no hesitation. I'm stepping down. But I'm not leaving alone. I'm starting a new company. A place without bias, without manipulation. The first to respond was Lucas Grant, the CFO. I'm with you. Then Jenna Ray, head of strategic clients. I've been waiting for this day. And just like that, the seeds of a quiet rebellion began to sprout. It was no longer just a reaction, it was action. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The bakery was the same as always. I brewed coffee, turned on the oven, prepped ingredients for the first batch. But today, something in me had changed. I was no longer a woman struggling to be accepted. I was a mother. And I would fight for my son. No matter who the enemy was or how powerful they seemed. On Monday morning, at 7:30, Aaron walked into the Whitmore and Crane headquarters for the last time. Charcoal gray suit, navy tie, and a slim leather briefcase in hand. But the heaviest thing he carried was unwavering resolve. The company's main office stood on Baxter Avenue, draped in company flags and banners promoting high-profile projects across Maine and Massachusetts. Aaron had climbed those steps thousands of times. But today, each step was a farewell. I didn't go with him that morning. He said, I need to finish this my own way. And I understood. Some battles a man has to fight alone. At 9 o'clock sharp in the 11th floor boardroom, Aaron called an emergency meeting with all department heads and the executive board. No flowers, no morning coffee, no polite smiles. I'm here to say goodbye. Aaron began. His voice wasn't loud, but every word hit the table like a hammer. I'm resigning, effective immediately, not just for personal reasons, but because I refuse to serve a corrupt system fueled by prejudice, coercion, and cruelty. The room fell silent. Margaret, his mother and current CEO, grew paler beneath her makeup. Aaron, you sound like an angry child, she said, voice cold as steel. You think clients will follow you? You think employees will leave this place to follow a rebel? Aaron placed a stack of papers on the table. The resignation letters of Lucas Grant, Jenna Ray, and 5 other senior managers. I don't think, I know. Margaret's fists clenched so tightly her veins bulged, but she had no response. Some board members glanced at each other, a few even nodded at Aaron as he rose and walked out of the room. There was no applause at that farewell. Only the sound of a door closing, heavy as a death knell for the empire Margaret once ruled with a fake smile. That afternoon, Aaron sent a company-wide email with a brief message. I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm leaving because I'm strong enough not to keep living in silence. To those who still believe in justice, fairness, and human dignity, a new door is opening. In less than 48 hours, over 30 employees submitted their resignations. The sales department lost nearly all its team leaders. The partnerships division, where Jenna had been the director, was unable to process client requests due to staff shortages. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Local financial papers began running headlines. Mass exodus at Whitmore and Crane, former executive Aaron Whitmore at the heart of the crisis. On the third day, I was checking the oven at the bakery when Aaron called. His voice was calm but firm. You should hear this. What happened? Lake Point Corporation has terminated its contract with Whitmore and Crane. Contract value, $27 million. I sank into a chair. Lake Point had been their biggest client for 8 years. Did they give a reason? Yes, they want to work with the team I'm leading, not with a company that puts ego above professional ethics. Then came Thompson Properties, followed by Coastal Bridge Development. One client after another pulling out like dominoes, collapsing in sequence. Aaron's phone buzzed non-stop. Lucas Grant. I've left headquarters, I'll meet you tonight, let's go over the plan. Jenna Ray. 3 strategic clients want to hear more about our new company. A former employee wrote. I don't know what you're building, but if you call, I'm in. That evening, when Aaron came home, he sat on the wooden kitchen chair. Sweat beading on his face, even though it was freezing outside. I set a mug of hot tea in front of him. You've started a battle bigger than any contract. He looked at me, eyes red but alive. Not a war, Camila. A liberation. He held my hand, as if to say more, but there was no need. We didn't know what the future would hold. But one thing I knew for certain. He was no longer alone. And for the first time in my life, I saw my husband truly free. I still remember that morning when everything started to fall apart. Not because of a board meeting or a lawsuit, but the front page of the Maine Daily Journal. The headline was bold, black and front and center. CEO, Whitmore under investigation for embezzlement and systemic workplace discrimination. I stared at the paper as if it were catching fire in my hands. Below the headline was a familiar photo. Margaret, her face still carefully made up, but her eyes revealed calculation and exhaustion. For the first time, I saw the real image of a woman who had lived her entire life behind a mask of pride. The article spanned 3 pages, filled with evidence and testimonies from former employees. She had used the company's private jet for personal shopping trips to Manhattan and Palm Beach, total annual cost over $350,000. The renovation of her Westbrook mansion, valued at more than $1.6 million, was disguised as a regional executive office. Racial discrimination and promotions. 3 Asian employees and 2 Black employees filed complaints alleging they were excluded from advancement lists, despite top performance. Female employees were forced to sign personal ethics contracts to be considered for major projects. One clause even regulated pregnancy. It was no longer rumor. The evidence came from internal emails, account statements, and even recordings of meetings. I turned each page, my hands trembling. Not from shock, but because everything I had ever sensed, ever suspected, was now printed, undeniable. The media storm erupted faster than anyone could have imagined. 3 major networks across New England ran continuous coverage. Journalists camped outside Whitmore and Crane's headquarters for 3 straight days. Margaret Whitmore's name shot to #1 on search engines in the Northeast overnight. On social media, post after post surfaced. I was forced to resign because I wouldn't attend a spa meeting the CEO demanded. I was the only female engineer on the team, but they gave the project to a newbie just because he was related to Margaret. Now, do you all believe it? That empire was built on cruelty and hypocrisy. Every hour brought new voices, former staff speaking up, fueling an uncontrollable wave of outrage. 2 days later, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but one of Aaron's old contacts, the company's legal director, told me. "Camilla, I've never seen Margaret like that." She sat in silence, her makeup couldn't hide the shake in her voice. When they read the suspension decision, she didn't react. No protest, not a word. And just like that, in less than a week, the queen of Whitmore and Crane had been dethroned. No farewell, no press conference, no internal announcement. Just a cold email sent at 4:12 a.m. with a subject line: "Temporary senior management adjustment. Margaret Whitmore withdraws from all executive roles." That afternoon, I was in the bakery kitchen, wiping caramel off a baking tray when Aaron walked in. Sunlight angled through the window, casting a glow on his face. A calm I hadn't seen in years. "Just heard, the board forced Mom to step down completely." I looked at him. "How do you feel?" He paused, then said, "Like, a heavy book has finally been closed. Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "No, but there's a part of me that's sad. Because it didn't have to be this way." I understood. Margaret's downfall didn't bring him joy. It was just a necessary ending, and far too late. That night, I read the final chapter of Charlotte's Web to Ethan. He had started smiling again. At least on the outside. When I kissed his forehead, he asked, "Mom, is Grandma still mad at me?" I squeezed his hand. "She's learning how to be a person again." Ethan nodded. "I just want her to understand. I'm not a dog." My heart clenched. I held him for a long time, saying nothing more. Because in that one sentence, my son understood more than any adult sitting in the boardroom of a collapsing company. Exactly 29 days after the night we left the Westbrook mansion in silence, the first sign bearing the name Whitmore and Whitmore Associates was mounted on the facade of a 3-story building in the center of Portland's business district. Aaron chose the name, not to preserve Margaret's legacy, but to redefine what the name Whitmore meant. "I don't need to abandon my name just because my mother did wrong," he told me the night before the opening. "I'll rebuild it, so one day Ethan can proudly say, 'I'm Ethan Whitmore.'" There was no grand launch party, no champagne, no media coverage. Just one small conference room, 5 desks, a wall plastered with plans, and 15 people who had left Whitmore and Crane to follow Aaron. Among them were Lucas Grant, head of finance, Jenna Ray, client strategy lead, 2 veteran construction engineers, and 3 young employees once excluded from projects simply because they didn't go to school with someone's son. No one was promised dream salaries. No one was guaranteed an office with an ocean view. But they all shared one thing: belief that this time, they were building something right. In the first week, they signed 2 contracts with former partners, worth just over $1 million, but enough to keep the lights on and the sign in place. By the second week, a group of clients from Massachusetts called, offering to transfer their entire real estate portfolio to the new company. In week 3, Portland Business Weekly published a 2-page feature praising Aaron's new leadership philosophy. "People first, profits second. And everything else will follow." By day 30, they had 9 projects in progress, 17 employees, and steady positive cash flow. As for Margaret, no one spoke of her anymore. The spotlight had shifted to a rising name: Aaron Whitmore, the man who gave up everything to start over. One evening, as I was closing the bakery, Aaron walked in. Shirt still dusted with flour, eyes tired but glowing. He placed an envelope on the table. "You should read this." I opened it. A handwritten letter, on old Whitmore and Crane stationery. At the top, just one name: Robert Whitmore. I had never been close to Frederick's father, the man he called Robert. He was quiet, reserved, and often stayed out of Margaret's battles with everyone else. I used to think he was a coward. But in the letter, he wrote, "Aaron, to be a father and not protect my son from his mother, that is the greatest failure of my life. When you walked away from the company, when Camila took Ethan from that dinner table and I said nothing, I knew I had lost more than just a family. I'm sorry. If you'll allow it, I would like to meet, not to explain but to start again. If not as father and son, then at least as 2 men trying to rebuild something better. Robert." I looked up at Aaron. "Are you going to respond?" He nodded. "I don't resent him anymore. And Ethan deserves to know what a healthy relationship between a father and grandfather looks like." The meeting happened on a Sunday morning at a small lakeside cafe. I stayed in the car with Ethan while Aaron went inside first. Through the window I saw the 2 men face each other. Robert took off his coat, poured water for his son. A small gesture, but one I had never seen from him before. They spoke, cautiously at first. But then, I saw Robert smile. Aaron nodded. And finally they shook hands. When Aaron came back to the car, Ethan jumped forward from the back seat. "Can I go in, Mom?" I nodded. "Yes, but only ask what you really want to know." "I just want to ask if Grandpa likes apple pie." 3 weeks later, the company's front sign was updated to Whitmore and Whitmore Associates, a family-built legacy for the future. Robert didn't return to the company in an executive role. He made a small investment, acted as an honorary advisor, and occasionally joined strategic meetings, as a quiet form of atonement, without making announcements. Aaron didn't need praise. I didn't need recognition. Ethan only needed someone to call him grandson and ask what he learned at school today. And that alone told us we were on the right path. Nearly 6 months after Whitmore and Whitmore Associates was founded, I happened to see Margaret on the evening local news. Not in the business section, not at a charity gala, not in an inspirational interview. She appeared in the corner of a security camera outside a rundown apartment complex near Back Cove, where most residents were retirees or divorcees. Her hair was visibly gray, no longer dyed. The elegant suits she once wore had been replaced by a worn, beige wool coat, buttoned unevenly at the collar. She walked past the camera with a paper bag in hand, not from Whole Foods but from a local corner store. Her back was slightly hunched. Her face, once the symbol of New England real estate power, now looked like a wrinkled sheet of paper from a decayed past. I turned off the TV, saying nothing. Aaron looked at me and asked just one question. "What do you see?" I replied, "The cost of arrogance." And then I added, "And the most fitting punishment, to be forgotten." No one mentioned Margaret anymore at corporate events. The same people who once tipped their hats to her, poured her wine, giggled at her stories during galas, now pretended not to know her when her name showed up in the news. Her social media accounts, once followed by over 100,000 people, had dwindled to just a few thousand, mostly those leaving hateful comments. No one invited her to speak, no magazines asked her opinion about the market. She lived like a ghost, wandering through the fractured memories she created for herself. The Westbrook mansion had been foreclosed by the bank. All its luxury furnishings were auctioned off publicly. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building. No housekeeper, no driver, not even anyone to talk to. People said she sat by the window every Sunday afternoon, holding a glass of cheap wine, watching families pass by on the street below. Once, a neighbor said she whispered something to herself. Quiet, but still audible. I used to have it all. Meanwhile, our lives entered a different phase. Gentler, simpler, and warmer than ever. Ethan and Grandpa Robert became unexpectedly close. At first it was just walks around the park. Then came Saturday morning baking sessions, where Robert took his role of oven temperature monitor very seriously. One time, I saw him crouch down, listening to Ethan explain the salted caramel tart recipe, his eyes as focused as if hearing a product strategy presentation from a top executive. I think we should add some orange zest at the end to make it smell better. Then try it. Science without experimentation is just theory. I stood behind the kitchen door, not stepping in, just silently watching the two of them. And suddenly, I realized, some cracks can't be mended, but some broken pieces can still come together to create something even more beautiful. One evening in late September, when golden leaves covered the streets, Aaron, Ethan and I sat under the soft yellow light in our kitchen, having dinner. The main course was creamy mushroom soup, made by Ethan, with guidance from Grandpa. "Mom," Ethan asked, "can I write an invitation for Grandpa Robert to come to my school's Christmas concert?" I smiled. "Of course you can. Then, should I invite Grandma Margaret too?" No one said anything for a few seconds. Aaron set down his spoon and looked at our son. "Son, kindness is a beautiful thing, but you're not required to share it with someone who doesn't appreciate it." Ethan nodded. "Then maybe next time." I looked at my husband. No bitterness, no resentment. Just a quiet truth recognized. And accepted. A week later, while I was watering the plants on the porch, the mailman delivered a gray envelope with no return address. Inside was a thin, folded piece of paper. Just 3 lines. "I have nothing left. But at least, now I understand." And I folded the paper back, not giving it to Aaron. Not to hide it, but because it was too late for last-minute realizations. That December, Ethan stood on the stage of Riverside Elementary and sang a solo of Silent Night. His voice rang out, pure and emotional, so much so that the audience applauded for nearly a full minute after he finished. I squeezed Aaron's hand. Robert sat in the front row, eyes misty. "He doesn't have to struggle to be accepted," he whispered. "He just needs to grow up in a family that loves the right way." I looked up at the stage, where Ethan bowed, cheeks flushed, a radiant smile on his face. And I knew. The final darkness had passed, and the next generation was beginning in the light. Camilla's story is a powerful reminder that reputation and power cannot mask cruelty or discrimination. Though she came from humble beginnings, she used strength and love to protect her son from harm, even daring to stand against a high society family. While the arrogant collapsed into isolation and obscurity, Camilla and her small family found peace, connection, and a new beginning, where light was built on compassion, not prestige. What do you think of Camilla's choices and the ending Margaret received? Was emotional justice truly served? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories to come.